Hey there. In this video, I wanted to share 10 quick takeaways from 2024. It was a great year overall. I learned a lot, and I just wanted to share 10 quick takeaways with you as a form of recap and knowledge. And it's actually number 7 or 8 on this list, and maybe I'll elaborate it more on it in the video. But we learn from, we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. So the extra 10% of effort, right, or way less than 10% of effort. So if I spent 365 waking days in 2024 living life and, learning lessons, let's say, or just gaining life experience, this extra, 10, 15, 30 minutes I'm going to spend just now, haven't decided yet, thinking and reflecting on that was going to so significantly increase the amount I learn from the year, because I'm actually taking the time to pause and think about the year and understand what are the lessons that I should be taking away from it. So start at the top of this list. Again, 2024 recap, 10 quick lessons. I am recording this February 11th, Tuesday, February 11th at 8:30 p.m. for those of you who find those details relevant and interesting. But number 1 on this list is avoid broad brushes. It's not to say never paint with a broad brush. It's not to say never extrapolate a learning from one situation to another, but it's really about being very, very careful to avoid making false conclusions. So there's a few examples I have here. I spent 4 months in New York last year, and a lot of highs, a lot of lows. I was living in Brooklyn, and I was living at a place called, what was it called? It was called the Outpost Club. And I was living with a roommate, and I was there in the winter. I was there from January until May. And the way Outpost Club works is it's furnished short-term housing. And so in the 3 months I was staying there, I had different roommates kind of coming in and out all of the time. And at the same time, very early days for my business, right? We were just getting it off the ground, specifically the newsletter business, which was at the time called Inbox Ghosts and is now called Orbit Marketing. Very early days for that business. And so really what day-to-day looked like was going to the gym and putting all my effort into this business. And so then I looked back on that period of time later on. I'm like, I don't know how fun that period of time was. And does that mean, right, that I don't like living with roommates? Does that mean that I don't like New York City? Does that mean the cold weather puts me in a bad mood? I don't really there's such a risk that you take the wrong conclusion from trying to analyze a period of time and define what the main lesson is. And I don't know if that's kind of an irony on this whole video, except for the fact that I ended up not moving back to New York after that lease kind of had ended, and I'm planning on going back soon. And I think another way this lesson kind of manifests itself is oftentimes with hiring. So let's say you hire, a very simple example would be you hire a salesperson and they don't work out. And so then you're trying to say, okay, well, I want to avoid that mistake. So why didn't this person work out? And what are the visible, identifiable characteristics about this person? It could be their country of origin. It could be their gender. It could be their height. It could be their hair color. It could be their eye color. You just don't actually know for sure, right? You can make your best guess. Okay, we don't want to, I think, the real takeaway in a hypothetical example like this, and I did unsuccessfully hire several salespeople last year and let several of them go because the hires were unsuccessful, would be, right, their experience level with this industry. And then also I am, of course, in this same lesson, don't want to rule myself out of the guilty party and say, in many ways, I think myself and my leadership, right, is a lot of what's to blame. But there's something that we wanted to learn from every hire. But for example, we hired I think people often make this mistake where they hire a developer from a particular country, and then that project doesn't go well, and they go, well, I'm never hiring from that country again. It's okay, I don't know if that's the conclusion. I think don't hire that person again. But I think there's also mistakes you made with regards to scoping the project and with regards to your expectation of how much could be accomplished with that much money. So maybe the lesson is don't try to underpay people for technical work. Not that this entire country, which has X millions of people, does not have among it a single developer who could have handled this project. So I think it's a very tempting mistake to make, which is you have an experience, you make a mistake, and you're what should we learn from this? And then you draw way too broad of a conclusion, which kind of closes your mind to, it's what specifically can we learn concretely that we know for a fact went wrong here? I know for a fact we didn't scope this project well enough. I know for a fact when I was in New York, I spent too much time working from home and too little time, right? Had I been working out of like a co-working space, meeting people and having like more social activity, maybe would have had a very different feeling about the entire experience. So be very, very cautious of how broad the brush is that you're painting with, so you don't draw false conclusions. That's number one on the list. And my goodness, we'll see how long it takes to get through all these. I originally was going to, I really want to reactivate, right, my personal Substack, Lewis's Learnings. I started it in 2020, and my goodness, did it open doors for me. I think like everything that's happened in your life can be traced back to things that you've done in the past, right? That's not the most insightful thing I've ever said. And now I'm in the newsletter business. I'm a very strong advocate for the power of newsletters. And I've just been spending so much time in the weeds. So we have our newsletter, the Orbit Marketing newsletter, and it's great. I want to, in addition to that, revive my newsletter, which is why we're at number 2 on this list, which is simple scales, complex fails. Again, it's something you hear from a lot of coaching people. Dan Martell is someone who I hear it from all the time. There's a coach I've worked with personally named Terrence Cruz. He's great. He says the same thing every time I talk to him, simple scales, complex fails. And I guess this is kind of a redundant part on the list here. Another takeaway that we'll discuss in more detail is like pick a format that you can stick with. And so I think a lot of the reason why I personally wasn't consistent and let's say faded sending my personal newsletter was not that I didn't see the value in it, but I just created such a high bar for myself because I was doing it when I was in college. I had no financial pressure really because I was on scholarship and my classes my final semester weren't terribly hard. So I just had all the time in the world to write these like long issues with a lot of detail and a lot of editing. And I don't know, like 4, 5, 6 hours maybe going into each one. And I don't think that's something I can totally justify present day. But I still have that expectation in my head. And so I was writing out just now kind of what would be the 10 points. And the idea for this content originally would have been a blog post for that newsletter as a way to reactivate it. And I just like have this aversion to like sitting and writing for that long because it is difficult, right? I can get on camera, I can talk. Like if you're watching this, you're like, this dude hasn't taken a breath. It's easier for me to speak at length than it is for me to write at length, just based on, I guess, the capacity I've currently developed for amount of concentrated, focused work throughout the day. And so the simple thing that you stick with is going to work so much better than the complicated thing that you don't stick with. And so I'm working with a fitness coach right now, and that's really great. And I think sometimes working with a coach helps you have a degree of commitment and accountability to be successful with something harder, something more complicated, because it's like, all right, I'm paying this person, so I'm paying attention and I'm going to put in that heightened amount of effort because I've committed to this. But if you're just holding yourself accountable to something, so the example for this, like not everyone, a lot of people are familiar with 75 hard. It is very simple. It's also very complicated. It's very involved. It's very difficult. And so what I did almost all of last year, and I think I pretty much sustained it, probably 300 plus days, is tracking your macros is a lot of work. I'm currently doing it, but that's a different story. But even when I'm not tracking my macros, I'm not weighing my food, I'm not logging anything in the app, my baseline system was, am I getting at least 100 grams of protein a day? Again, wasn't really like enough if you're really in like perma bulk mode. When I was in a different season of life, when I was just like, look, I've put in a lot of work to get to this far. I just want to at least maintain. I know that I'm not tracking my calories, but just hitting this one milestone, distilling the whole system of like diet and exercise to one KPI that I can hit every single day without fail, travel, whatever, I can always find a way to get at least 100 grams of protein, right? It's like I'm looking over there in the pantry in the distance, and I see, there's a protein bar with 20 grams of protein. You go to McDonald's, you get 4 a la carte hamburger patties. Now I'm making this sound not so simple, but you get like 2 high protein entrees, eat a thing of yogurt, buy a Fairlife at the gas station. Like you're there. You've gotten 100 grams of protein. So the simple thing that you stick with is going to work. Whereas all of these like complicated systems. So I kind of also have this handy, which is like this pen and paper planning system that I use. I do use ClickUp. I love ClickUp, but it tends to get overcomplicated very quickly. Anytime you can create recurring tasks in a system, you tend to create too many of them. Whereas a piece of paper for just planning what are like the most important things to do today and cross them off the list, it's great. Another one, a great example of this, you'll probably see this right here, which is a pen and paper journal. I think so many people, I think I even watched Dickie Bush's annual reflection. If you're not familiar with Dickie, I've done 2 podcasts with him now. He's a brilliant guy. I really admire him in a lot of ways. And he's kind of the same thing. Like he's got all sorts of complicated systems, and he always, every so often, kind of reminds us why he goes back to a simpler system. So for journaling, which is a really, really, really critical habit for me, is something that I attribute like only good things to. Like any good thing that's come in the past 5 years of my life probably has something to do with journaling, because clarity of thought is a superpower. And I mean, clarity of thought and clarity of your goals and the clarity of how you think you're going to accomplish those goals, the clarity of your plan, the clarity of your motivation and your rewards and your consequences. Just the more crystal clear all of those things are defined, the better. And last year, I always, ever since I started journaling, had the intention of like, this is so great, I want to do it every day. And when I try to make Notion templates or ClickUp templates or Roam Research templates with like 8 bullet point questions, and it just always falls apart, and I never stick with it because it's freaking complicated. It's like, all right, I just want to go to bed. And what I have now, and I've been really consistent since I bought this journal, is it's just a pen and paper journal, right? It's always out. I don't always do when I'm traveling, but that's okay, right? I just hold the standard of like, if I'm home in a normal everyday life, and that's kind of what I want to optimize for, is like in my normal, because that's the majority of my days, right? Are like a expected day in the routine. Do I at least open the damn thing, and do I like write, I don't have to do a full page, but just before bed, did I start writing? Did I put like a word down? Did I put an A entry every day on paper? And because it's there and I pick up a pen and I click it and I start writing, that's the entire process. There's no like open, copy, paste. The whole reason we're making this video is because my internet's not working right now. And a whole nother lesson on the list. We can get philosophical about that, but my internet's not working. And I can make and if my internet's not working and my journal template is in Notion, I'm not going to journal tonight. So it's like, but like, it's a piece of paper. You can put it in your backpack. So much simpler. Okay, number 3, my goodness, is to buy back your time. The book is called Buy Back Your Time. I talked about Dan Martell a minute ago. I'm a big fan of his. One of my rules is I really try not to have very serious mentor figures if they don't have children. Dickie Bush being an exception, right? He doesn't have kids yet, but he's young enough where I'll cut him some slack. Dan Martell, from my perspective, seems like the total package, right? He's in great shape. He's running a business. He seems very happy. He talks about his relationship being successful. He talks about having kids. He has employees. Like he seems to be kind of doing a little bit of everything and doing it well. And so his book, Buy Back Your Time, I had myself and both my co-founders read it last year. Super, super good book. Recommended to me very early on by Pierre. He's like one of the co-founders of Flowsy. He always recommends books to me really early. He's always a little bit ahead of the curve, maybe a lot of bit ahead of the curve. And the principle from that book is to first hire to buy back your time and then hire to grow. I think a mistake that is, if you're watching this video, I don't even know if anyone's watching this video. If you're watching this video this far and you're like, man, this guy's on 16 minutes talking straight. So many hiring mistakes last year came in violation of this principle, which is hire first to buy back your time and then hire to grow. And I think this is especially true when you're bootstrapped, self-funded, because you don't have that much money, right? There's 2 different types of hires. This is something I learned. I don't even remember the guy's name. I think his name is Brian Smith on LinkedIn. He has a big beard, and I've taken some discovery calls with him, and he's provided a lot of value in the discovery process. I haven't moved forward with working with him yet or anything, but I've learned a lot from the 2 initial conversations we had. And there's growth hires and there's clone hires. So if you have the budget and I'm going to make up an amount of money, let's say like $500,000 a year, like I bet if you pay someone $500,000 a year and like they're truly qualified for that, they could probably like go create a department. But when you're still in the founder role in your business, the better path, the better sequencing, and sequencing is a word we use all the time around here. The better sequencing is, what's something you're currently doing? Could somebody else do it? Okay, great. Now you have more time to do other things. And just following that loop indefinitely, rather than like, what's something that's not happening that I wish was happening? Maybe this person can go do that for me. And that is so critical of a sequencing situation where, and there's obviously exceptions. It's like, if you don't know how to be a bookkeeper, is it more efficient for you to learn how to keep your books versus just have someone else come into your books? But in terms of like net new IP, like net new from scratch, I was trying to think of like the French word, like or the Latin word, de novo. Is that the word? From nothing. Or now I have to scratch all of that. This is the tired brain, but there's a lot of juice left in the system. Let's recharge. Trying to create something from scratch, you should probably just figure it out yourself. Obviously, the next point is like bringing coaches and consultants, improving systems and things like that. But in terms of like building and executing the things that are on your plate that you can get someone else to do, get them doing them, and then you have more capacity for you to do the next most important thing. And so if that's not resonating with you, maybe you don't have employees, maybe you haven't fired, maybe you haven't gone through the trials and tribulations and the battle scars that I've accumulated. And I don't say that with like arrogance. It's like I've stumbled and scraped the knee and wasted money. And there's a person named Nat Eliason. I interviewed him last year. It was a big goal of mine for literally 5 years to interview him. And then it happened. It was magical. Everything we ever dreamed of. Shout out Nat Eliason. And he said this thing once. He like opened a cafe and it like shut down because of COVID and all that. And it was like, I'm going to make up a number. He lost $50,000 because of it. And the thing he said was that, you know, every lesson comes with a price. Some just have higher tuition than others. And so for me, it's like, there's no way of avoiding learning these things. Sometimes you just buy a book and then you spend $10 and you learn the lesson from reading the book. Other times you hire someone, you pay them 10 grand over 2 months and then nothing happens. So every lesson has a price, different tuition. Anyway, read the book, buy back your time. The first time I tried to read it, we weren't even making enough money to like consider hiring anyone, so it didn't really click. And then we fortunately moved on to a point where it did make sense to hire people, and the book was very, very helpful, and I should probably reread it. Number 4 is that it applies to both, you know, we'll call expectations. And maybe you can call this cope, but I like to think that, and this is like not an idea that is original. I don't know if any of these are original, and ultimately that doesn't really matter, is coaches, conferences, consultants, they don't always work out, but the ones that do tend to work out like tremendously well. And so a lot of people will be like, go to a conference, don't meet anybody, don't close any business, and then back to number 1, draw the conclusion, conferences don't work. Or it's like, I was on this guy, Charles, his Cormier, I think, or Cormier, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Charles, Cormier, and he's really, really, really evangelical about how excellent podcasts are as a way to meet potential customers and turn them into potential customers into actual customers. And the kind of false conclusion, right, and the expectation is like doing 2 podcasts, no one becomes a customer. Oh, this doesn't work. Podcast people don't become customers. Clearly, this doesn't work. It's your expectations were misset. And so I apply this idea to conferences, to coaches, consultants. Like I've hired a lot of consultants. I've brought in a bunch of agencies. I've spent a lot of money on a lot of things, and sometimes they don't work out. But some of the ones that do work out so tremendously well. And I think this is a mistake that myself and my business partner, Sean, made early on in our business career, was like, we hired some people and we didn't keep them. And we're like, therefore we shouldn't hire people. We're the only 2 people who can do stuff, right? That's the painting with a broad brush. That's the drawing inappropriately broad, sweeping conclusions. That's ultimately hurting us in the end. So it's like, I've hired some marketing agencies to do things for us. I wasn't pleased with the results. So I'm just never going to hire a marketing agency again. I've hired a bunch, I joined Client Ascension, which I think was great. I can't speak to it present day because I haven't been in it in a long time. But when I joined December of 2022, bought a membership that was good for a year, tremendously valuable. Like, tremendously valuable. I can't speak highly enough about how good my experience was in Client Ascension back in the day. And I don't even have like an affiliate link. I probably should, because they probably got great kickbacks because it's expensive. But that was worth it 10x, right? That was worth it 10x over. And so since then, I've been a lot more, because I've seen that, right? I've been a lot more open-minded to spending money on fitness coaches and sales coaches and all this good stuff, because the ones that just hit so tremendously hard that is unbelievable. And the one learning, right, it's like I hired Terrence, and I've really been disappointed with myself in terms of how little I've reached out to try to utilize him as a resource, because of like, I paid him a lot of money for unlimited one-on-one access, and I just don't hit him up that often. But it's because when I first hired him, I was like really kind of going through a string of like taking a lot of sales calls and not closing them. Then we worked on that the first couple weeks working together. I started closing deals. I'm like, I've closed enough deals to like pay your fee, like, and I got kind of lazy. But he was so much faster. And you also have that mental motivation of like, I just paid this guy to teach me how to grow my business. If I don't like immediately realize that growth in excess of what I paid him, I'm going to be freaking frustrated. And so that's the other thing, is you just light a fire. Anyway, that is the takeaway. Number 5, a handful of mentors on repeat. I was asked earlier today by Charles on the podcast, what am I doing to learn? And like, I'm at this point where, and I said this on that podcast, what's separating me from my goals, what's separating me from achieving my goals looks a lot like sitting in this chair and getting work done, right? It's like, I know what it takes not to get to the infinite level, not to get to $1 billion a year, not to get to $100 million a year, but to get somewhere between like 1 and 10, it's a linear scaling factor of what we're doing now. And it's literally just like, go apply the ideas. Like I've got on that coffee table, .com secrets, traffic secrets, expert secrets, $100 million offers. Do you know how like much those guys, Russell Brunson and Alex Hormozy, I don't think he has kids, so that kind of disqualifies him on the mentor rule, but it doesn't mean he doesn't know his things about that's like the delineation on the mentor rule of like, they have to have kids, they don't have to have kids. Is he giving generic, like I shouldn't listen to him on prescriptive life advice because he doesn't have the life I want. Maybe he'll have kids one day, but I just don't know. But I can take prescriptive advice from him when it comes to like, if you're selling a service-based offer to other businesses, here's some advice from my life experience having sold like the exact same thing. So anyway, like I've read enough damn books for this season of life to solve the current set of problems in front of me. It's not lacking for ideas, it's lacking for execution. And so let's be honest, most of the time when I'm listening to content, it's for entertainment, right? It's like I'm eating breakfast, there's no one who lives here, I don't want to just eat in silence, I don't want to listen to the news, I don't want to listen to music, I don't want to listen to just like some dumb entertainment. So it's like I'm just repeating things I already know. So I've picked my handful of mentors, right, at a distance. I don't have personal relationships with these people. It's Dan Martell, it's Russell Brunson, and then maybe there's a tier 2 list, which is like Daniel Fazio from Client Ascension, and then I like Andy Elliott. I like his energy. Not everyone loves Andy Elliott, but I like Andy. And then Dickie Bush is on there, and then Alex Hormozy, right? These are people who have solved the problems I want to solve. They've put out super helpful content around like, here's exactly how you solve X issue if you're in X situation. And all I need to keep doing is like show up every day, revisit those materials, get the work done. So absolute, I thought I had another little note here, just absolutely manic. Like I was listening to it is like the biggest form of hubris to think that you can listen to something once and like, you've got it. It's like, really? Like listen to that like 7 times, 10 times, 100 times. Like there's an episode I did on my podcast with Vash Tamanek. He was, again, a coach that I hired and paid a decent amount of money after I had hired him, or I met him through the podcast and I decided to hire him because I was so impressed by him and just wanted to like emulate him in a lot of ways. So I was like, well, let me just pay him to work with him and then I'll learn a lot from him, even more so. And I've listened to that podcast with Vash like 8 or 9 times. I should listen to every time I mention this. I'm like, I should go listen to again. And I was at the gym like yesterday listening to a podcast with Dan Martell, and I was like, I've already listened to this. I'm gonna keep listening to it because like that's good. That's a reminder. I forgot about this. So anyway, good content on repeat. You don't need that many ideas. You need a handful of ideas. You already know enough. It's just about doing it. So it's more just about getting aligned and obsessed with like the few things that need to be so deeply ingrained, right? That once you got them, you got them. So number 6, this one's like dark, but escape is dangerous. Don't escape alone. I don't mean to be so dark with that. Now we're going to shed some light on it. I read some fiction last year, and anytime I read fiction last year, I literally, because I can, right, because I am self-employed, I took the day off to finish the book. Every time I started a book last year that was fiction and it was good, I literally just like didn't work until I finished the book. This happened when I first started the business with Sean back in 2022. I read like I started working with him 3 weeks in. I started reading the first Harry Potter series, like rereading Harry Potter, and like I just didn't work for 8 days. I just like crushed the whole series. And I think that because I don't know like what it is about my brain or entertainment, but like I don't like Netflix. I like Netflix. It's people are like, why don't you watch Netflix? It's fun. It's like, yeah, it's too fun. It's too entertaining. It's like really hard to put it down. And I, since then, kind of believe in like group entertainment. Don't escape. So last year, same thing. Like during the 4th of July, I just moved into this apartment and I didn't have like specific plans. And so I started reading the Will Roby series by David Baldacci, which is just like very, I don't know, basic murder, mystery, crime stuff. And I like crushed those 5 books over 5 days and didn't get a damn thing done. And I just kind of like, I don't think that's good. I don't think that's healthy. And so I still like watch movies. I'll still watch television, just not by myself, because like another person is not going to go to the same depths of the rabbit hole that I will. So no fiction right now, just because it is too entertaining. These escapes. And so the other day, I'm using an app called Screens, and it really helps me use my phone a lot less. And so it's like, all right, I'm not going to use my phone. I'm not going to use email on my phone or text on my phone or Slack on my phone, because like I'm just too prone to like checking those. Like, oh, is there a new message from the team? Is there a new sale? Like any of that stuff's just too much looping. So I need some friction. So it's like, let me download chess. And then I was playing chess like literally nonstop. And so I should like pickleball. Like what's nice about like in-person things or things with other people is like you can only play so much pickleball before your body is like, dude, we got to stop with pickleball. You can only like do so much yoga, like all these activities. So escape with friends. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep working because I'm having fun, evidently. Number 7. Oh, back to call this one Tuesdays are for Twitter. I wrote this on the paper. If I have one regret from last year, it's that I spent far too much time on Twitter. I'd have to I could probably look it up, whatever it was. Like I get like depressed thinking about how much time I spent on Twitter, and like it's probably not that terrible. And like it's like how a lot of people who like don't drink a lot will be like, you would not believe how much I drank last weekend. And then it's like you went out to dinner 2 nights in a row and you had 2 drinks both nights. So it's like your definition of drinking a lot compared to like the average American. It's probably like your bender was like the average American's typical week. And so that's probably how I feel like I hold myself to a pretty high standard for productivity. But if it's like an hour a day, it's like 7 hours a week on Twitter. Like, what did that do for me? You know, like, yes, it's been a blessing and a curse. I've met a lot of really amazing people connected over Twitter. It's been good for business, good for the podcast, all those things. But also it's been terrible for everything. It's been like so terrible. You know, like if you think about your headstone when you're dying, or when I guess you're already dead, when you have a headstone, like you don't want it to be like, this guy read a lot of tweets, right? You want to have a body of work. It's like, this guy watched a lot of movies. This guy spent a lot of time on Twitter. Now, it'd be different if I was writing a lot of tweets, but I really didn't, or they weren't that substantial. They weren't that useful. Again, not to say all of this advice is good for everyone, but myself and my brain and the way that, especially when I'm living alone, even when I'm not, it's just like, it's just addictive. It's endless. It's junk. And it's when I think on like, who do I want to be? What do I want to think of me? Like, what I want others to think of me? What's the positioning I want to have to the world? It's like, oh yeah, Lewis is a guy who spends a lot of time on Twitter. That's not what I want people thinking. It's like, Lewis is someone who's makes excellent videos or runs a great business or has maybe like there's a more thoughtful evergreen resource, like a deeper resource that I've made. Like, oh yeah, I remember he wrote that guide to XYZ and it was super helpful and I used it to achieve this problem. Now it's like useful still to like put out tweets. It's like, oh yeah, that, you know, and I have like an Aura smart photo frame with that like has screenshots of nice tweets, a lot of them from Daniel Fazio, of like, that's a nice thing I'll want to remember. It's not that you can't use Twitter to be valuable, but especially during the election, and it just became too much. So now I have it only accessible on my computer once a week on Tuesdays, significantly reduce the time. Again, what's separating me from my goals right now across the board, right? Because like Twitter's not making me more fit. It's not information. It's purely just time in the chair, doing deep work and executing the things I know I need to execute. And then it's also like getting out in the world and being happy and like having a social life and doing that as well, which again, Twitter doesn't really support. It's nice. Again, I've hosted a lot of events last year, like in-person conferences, and it's nice to use Twitter as a broadcast mechanism. But I think for me, my brain, the algorithm's better than my brain. And so it's just better for me to stay away and find ways to supplement, which is a lot of how I ended up in this damn newsletter situation in the first place. Because in college, I didn't really use social media at all, but I still wanted to like have, you know, the leverage of like a digital broadcast medium, like a Facebook, where it's like, how do I tell people what's going on in my life and keep in touch with people over distance? What if I just send an email instead of using social media? So it's all very full circle. All right. Number 8, if I'm going correct here, is I'm just going to repeat it. And good ideas bear repeating to yourself every day. It's like, I don't know how many of you are religious out there, but like religious people, specifically Jews, it's like you say the same prayers every single day. It's like you don't just say it once and you remember the thing. It's like, no, it's like every time you eat, you remind yourself that you're grateful to eat. Every time you wake up, you remind yourself that you're grateful to wake up. So for me, repeating the same idea in this video, you can just deal with it, which is number 8, that we don't learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. We don't learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. This is why I love writing. This is why I love journaling. Because the amount of times, right, you go through a day and like you think to yourself this thought, which is, I'm in business, I'm playing the game, I'm doing stuff, I probably learn a lot from this. But no, it's only when you stop and think about it. And so as a company, we do, sprint planning, we run on agile cycles, we have a Monday retrospective, right? That is a time where as a team, we spend, real deliberate effort with no other distractions saying, what did we do well last week? What are some areas for improvement? What are some actions to take? That is where the learning happens, right? That is us reflecting on experience. And it's the same thing on any interval. It's me doing this video once a month. Like the depth inside of my psyche, the amount that my soul has been modified by making this video in terms of how less likely I am to repeat these mistakes in the future because of the time taken to think about these things is tremendous, tremendous, tremendous. And so, pen and paper journal, end of day today. Very basic framework. Again, my only rule, like I said, a simple formula, click the pen, write a little bit. But if I'm going to follow a template, it's like, what are some things I'm grateful for? What are some things I'm excited about for tomorrow? And then what are just like some, I call it a CI, right? I used to work at Mercedes-Benz. One of their core principles is continuous improvement. And so I call it like CI. What is a CI from today? What is like a small way I could have been better or some way I want to do something better tomorrow? And what almost always comes to mind, first of all, I think interpersonally, about a lot of like, there was this conversation I was having with someone. I wasn't particularly present. I should send an apology for like, hey, just wanted to like apologize for earlier today when you were talking about this and now it's all about this. And like the amount like that of goodwill I think that builds, especially like as a manager, as a leader with employees, like that conversation I was having with this person, I was basically like, your first draft was bad, make your second one better. And then like in hindsight, I could have like said something better. I should have been like, hey, I was like really hungry when I sent that to you this morning and I was really distracted and I had to run to a meeting and I just wanted to get the progress made. I understand a lot of the reason the first draft wasn't up to my standard was because I didn't have a template for you, so you had no idea what to make. So thanks for trying. In the future, what we should probably do is have you work on the project for 90 minutes, then send me your work so far so you don't spend 10 hours on something. And the amount of like mindful moments I've caught in retrospect because of this journaling at the end of the day where I'm like, damn, I was totally being an ass earlier in this situation. And like it was, everyone understood or no, I don't know if anyone understood. I gave myself a pass because of A, B, and C. But the amount of like retroactive little like 30-second apologies I send, and I'm not saying this is like an excuse, but it goes appreciated to be like, okay, yeah, he was busy, but like he understands it and he cares. And so that's just reflecting on the day and like finding small moments where like I could have been better and could have like been more polite and proactive and mindful. And then hopefully that creates a culture where other people kind of adopt those same behaviors. And then the other area of this is the CI, right? Which is like, I used my phone too much today. Okay, why did I use my phone too much today? What were the opportunities? Whereas the circumstances, the triggers for using the phone, how can I plan to use it less tomorrow? And could I put it in a different room? Like I'm trying to think of like a specific thing. I could probably like flip through the pages here. But I cannot tell you, especially like, running blank on ideas here. I'm hitting the end of the video, but I think we understand the premise of like, we don't learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience because your brain, if you think about it like a sheet of paper or like a dry erase board, the experiences and the lessons from the previous day, they just get wiped away unless you do anything with them. And now I've got sitting here and you kind of proceduralize knowledge and you forget what you didn't know and you forget what it's like to not know things. So anyway, it's nice to document the journey, produce real artifacts, and move on to the next and penultimate takeaway, which is another semi-repetitive one, which is pick what you can stick with. I already mentioned this. The reason that I feel like I didn't succeed with the Lewis's learnings consistently was because I picked something that was just too much effort to do every week based on the reward in my life at the time. And so I was like, what do I feel like I can stick with? It's like, I like making video. This is very easy for me to talk. Hopefully it's easy and pleasant to listen to. Pick what you can stick with. And that applies to fitness. That applies with I forget if it was like John Franklin Templeton or there's like Jack Bogle. I read a book last year called Richer, Wiser, Happier. I thought it wasn't going to be excellent based on the title, just being honest. And then I read it and I was like, this book was quite good. And it tells the story of maybe it's like, what's his name? A Man for All Markets. I don't totally recall the guy's name. Maybe it'll come to me in a second. But a famous investor who just like lived the most moderate, consistent lifestyle where he's like, all I want to do, right? I call this is a whole other thing from last year is I call it my daily commitment. It's just like a self-designed version of 75 hard for holding the same level of like absolutely no exceptions and doing these whatever habits every single day, but just not the same things that Andy's picked. I don't recommend it until you've finished 75 hard, because you don't learn the lessons of 75 hard any other way than doing 75 hard. But in terms of life after 75 hard, the My Daily Commitment system is kind of a similar situation that I've devised. And I try to make it something that I can stick with 100% success. And so that means saying, so an example way of how I would like think through one of those situations when those My Daily Commitment 30-day sprints would say like, here are the 6 habits I'm going to do every single day. However, in advance, I'm noting these exceptions. If I'm traveling on a plane this day, I do not need to do A, B, and C. If it is a weekend, I do not need to do A, B, and C. And so I have these stipulations because what happens is if we stumble, then the whole thing falls apart like a house of cards. You're like, I've made one mistake. I'll get back on the horse tomorrow. And then you don't get back on the horse the next day. 2 days happen, 3 days happen. You've forgotten about the whole thing. It's just human nature. Versus instead, pre-designing some slack into the system, right? So pick a format that you can stick with 100% no matter what. And for me, right, that looks like I want to put in 30 minutes like of on the business deep work no matter what every single day. Now you might say 30 minutes of deep work, you're self-employed, that sounds like nothing, right? That's not much at all. But what if there's a day where I literally have like 8 hours of meetings? So I'm going to get 8 hours of meetings and 3 hours of this and work out and take care of the dog. It's like, that's not possible. But no matter what, there's no excuse not to get 30 minutes of deep work, no distractions, no phone, whatever, set a timer every single weekday. And so it's a bare minimum standard that no matter what, I can be successful with for a month. And I don't have to do it on weekends or I don't have to do it on days that I'm traveling. And I send these clear stipulations, right? It's like, it's tough to be completely sober if you don't want to be completely sober, but it's a lot easier to say, look, if I am drinking, absolute cap of 2 drinks, write out your plan. There's like 8 edge cases. You think through them all. You're the QA engineer who walks into the bar. And that's a joke. No one's going to get it if anyone's still this deep in this video. And I know I have so much doubt about people making it to the end. I don't know the last time I recorded, like, or if ever, like solo content that's 37 minutes long. So if you're still here, thanks. And QA engineer walks into a bar. Think through your edge cases, you get better at it with time. And so it's like, for me, like I want to train my dog for 5 minutes every day was part of the commitment during one of these cycles. It's like, obviously, if I don't have my dog, I don't have to train him because like I'm traveling and I left him here. And it's not like, oh, I need to make sure that the dog sitter spends 5 minutes training him. Think through the edge cases. And then I was 100% successful at what I set out to do, which included the fact that on weekends, I didn't have to hold myself accountable to this, and this part of the program, right? It's like, plan a cheat day into the program, you're having 100% success with the program, rather than like, if you know you're going to need a cheat day, setting unrealistic expectations. So pick a cadence that you can stick with and think it through. And then number 10 on this list, it's 10 and 11. Number 10 is it's neither good nor bad. There's like, this is coming, I've just not been the first person to come up with this. There's like Jewish expressions for it. There's Chinese expressions. I mean, you could like Google Translate, ChatGPT. And, there's so many situations where it's like you miss a red light and then you see like a cop would have gone the other way. And like, that guy probably would have been on my tail and my registration was expired. So it's like, it's just impossible to know. So like tonight, for example, my internet didn't work. And I'm like, oh no, my internet didn't work. There's other stuff I need to do. So I just like started, I was like, all right, well, it's too early to go to bed. It's like, what should I do? Well, part of my night routine, I was going to go in a ClickUp and like plan the next day because we have this automation that sends in our group Slack channel with all the employees how many overdue tasks you have. And it's kind of like a form of public shaming. And I've got a bunch of tasks that are due today that I'm not going to finish quite yet today. And so it's going to extend them to be due tomorrow, but I need the internet to work to do that. Anyway, so like there's kind of my wind down ritual of like, make sure I reassign myself all the due dates so that I don't have the public shaming of letting my ClickUp get out of whack, and already brushed my teeth, all that good stuff. I had to take my retainer out to record this video, and I was like, I don't want to record this whole video with my retainer in. And anyway, I started writing, and I was like, well, because I was like, all right, well, journal, that's part of the night routine. I can't go to bed without at least putting the page down. And so then I was like, all right, well, earlier today I was doing a podcast with my friend Sean Allard, and he has a great personal Substack. It's, tremendously beneficial in his life and deals and lead flow and events and opportunity. And I'm like, dude, why am I like, I have the newsletter business. Newsletters are so amazing, which they are. It's just they're freaking hard, which is why my business exists and why we have a lot of customers, because people want a newsletter and don't want to do all the work. And maybe I should hire my team where I like send them a 40-minute video and they turn it into the newsletter. And I could probably also just send them, because they're really good at what they do, the list of 10 bullet points and have them extrapolate it. Story for another time. They've been helping with our newsletter. I don't want to like have them launch 8 newsletters for us at once. It's like, pick a format we can stick with. And for now, let's get one newsletter on behalf of the business and then the rest of your time going to the client work. But it's neither good nor bad. The internet didn't work tonight. I started journaling. I'm getting this video out. It's always hard to like think of these examples in retrospect of like, you know, like the classic one you always think of, like traffic. It's like, oh, I wish I left 5 minutes earlier. Then you see there was an accident there. And it's like, okay, well, I'm kind of glad I left at the time that I left at. And, or I missed the train. And then you realize there was a crazy person on the train. And it's tough because like someone else is there's examples where like someone else isn't bearing the brunt of the bad decision or like the luck. Like it's not to be like, oh, my good fortune is someone else's bad fortune. But there's always like, I'll think of one, for example, which is like a deal doesn't work out, right? Like you want to close a prospect and they don't work out. And it's like, okay, well, what happened, right? Why didn't we win this deal? What do we need to learn from this? Like why didn't they move forward? How can we prevent that from ever happening again? And so let's say they didn't move forward because you didn't have a presentation. They're like, look, man, you don't have a sales presentation. I don't want to work with a company that doesn't have a sales presentation. And this is getting like really niche, but you make the sales presentation and then the next day you get a call booked on the calendar with a customer 10 times their size. And then you give them the sales presentation. It's excellent. They're like, I'm so glad you had the sales presentation because I almost hired someone and I didn't because they didn't have one. And so it's like, because you didn't win that deal, it inspired an action that led to you winning the deal 10 times bigger that you wouldn't have done had the first thing not worked out. So anyway, I'm glad my internet didn't work today. I've had it on my list for a long time to both try, and when I say my list, there's like a list I have in ClickUp of like issues, like things I want to fix in my life, like areas that are concerning me, kind of like small paper cuts that I want to slowly resolve over time. Then I also have CI ideas that like I can't necessarily get to that day, but I want to get to. It's been on my list to do more solo content because I think it's a unique skill that maybe you can tell me I'm not good at it, but a lot of people cannot just freaking take 1 page of notes, literally like 1 page of notes, and speak for 40 minutes without interruption at like probably an average of like 230 words per minute. You can tell me if it was coherent, if it was useful. Maybe it's not a skill, but the gift of gab, whether or not it's a gift or it's just gab, you can tell me. But like we can agree, like ChatGPT, a lot of words came out. It's like people are like, can ChatGPT is it good at writing? I don't know. It's good at producing words. Maybe you can say I'm just good at producing words, not good at speaking. But we all understand that a lot of words came out of my mouth in the past 40 minutes. So I've been wanting to do more solo content. I've been wanting to find something to send to the personal Substack. And I've just been wanting to, for the sake of clarity of my thinking, do some rigorous reflection. So hopefully this video served as some rigorous reflection, hopefully inspired you to get a pen and paper journal, because man, is that a way better way of living. Do that before you go to bed, right? Just write a few words down. And then number 13 or 12 or whatever the heck is, just do it now, right? It's like, if I left this list sit to the morning, there's no way this would have been revived. I was actually today working on a lead magnet about the ladder of core beliefs. That's a whole exercise for another time. I had the idea, but then I had to go record a podcast, so I recorded a voice note. Then I started working on it, and that's what I would have worked on if my internet was working. And so I had the idea of like, oh, well, maybe I can like by hand write the contents of this lead magnet, and then just the pen started moving on this video. And we've got Lewis's Learnings video edition, the very first video issue of Lewis's Learnings, 10 not so quick lessons from 2024. If you watch the end, please let me know. That would be very interesting information for me. Anything you'd like me to cover in the future, any feedback, this is the first one of these. So much appreciated. Have a good evening. And till next time, thanks so much for watching. I will be around. You know how to find me if you watched the end of this video. Maybe you don't. I'm on LinkedIn, Lewis Shulman. I have a Substack, Lewis's Learnings. I have a business, Orbit Marketing. If you look up, like, people who want to get in contact with me are able to for now. All right. So there you go. Thanks so much. You have a great rest of your life. All right. I need to go to bed. That's number 14 on the list, is like, know when to stop. And now it's time to stop. Peace.